Shalom. It's the practice in most synagogues to read a portion each week from the Torah. And usually the portions have a name, and it's the same portion in each synagogue that's read. And over the year, you read the entire Torah portion by portion. And at the end of the year, you finished all the portions, you start back from the beginning. So every year the Torah is read aloud in synagogue. Now this week's portion was vayikra, which is the first of Leviticus, and it deals with sacrifices. Most people probably know, if you read through the Bible, you will see that sacrifices, most of them were eaten afterwards. The system of sacrifice turned into kosher slaughter. For the Muslims, it turned into halal. Because in most of the ancient systems, they couldn't waste food. They didn't have a lot of food. It was a precious commodity. So sacrifice was actually preparing the food to be eaten. It's that way today in voodoo, in Santeria, and those systems where they still perform sacrifice. You're actually killing the animal, preparing it, and then eating it. But if you look at this week's section, it starts talking about certain offerings in which the entire animal is burned up. It's slaughtered and it's burned up. So you've lost that entire animal. And I thought that's got to be symbolic. You don't waste resources like that. And it wasn't just animal sacrifice. People focus in on that for some reason. But you sacrificed, a portion of your grains. You sacrificed a portion of your oil. You sacrificed a portion of your fruits, of your vegetables. All of your wealth, a portion of it was a sacrifice. But the majority of the time it was not destroyed. It was used. So why would you burn up an animal? And I found this and I thought it was really interesting because I researched it to find out why. It says, a man who shall bring near of you an offering to God. The verse does not say a man of you who shall bring near an offering, but a man who should bring near of you an offering. The offering must come from within the person. It is the animal within men that must be brought near and elevated by the divine fire upon the altar. And there's a couple of different quotes from the Talmud concerning this portion. And it is said of a large ox, a fire offering, a sweet savor. Of a small bird, a fire offering, a sweet savor. And of a meal offering, a fire offering, a sweet savor. This is to teach you that it is the same whether a person offers much or little, as long as he directs his heart to heaven. And there's a couple of comments here from the Talmud, a couple of quotes concerning this portion. And one thing it says is a soul who shall offer a meal offering to God. Why is the meal offering distinguished in that the expression soul is used? Because God says, who is it that usually brings a meal offering? It is a poor man. I account it as though he had offered his own soul to me. And there's several that go along with that general thing. And that to me is beautiful. In Judaism, there's not a repression of the animal senses. If you fast, the fasting itself makes you unclean because you are depriving yourself of the pleasures that God has given you. We are supposed to delight in the world that God has created. We're given guidelines. There is such a thing as too much or in the wrong context. But we are supposed to enjoy life. So when you sin, when you do something wrong, the idea isn't to say, oh, it's my flesh, the flesh is evil, I need to do away with the flesh. The idea is, I could have done better. I could have elevated my animal self. I could have elevated my senses, been more refined in my pleasure. So what do? A symbolic raising of the animal towards God. And I think that's beautiful. And sacrifice was something that all the pagan societies around them were doing. It wasn't what God wanted. He didn't want sacrifice. And I think God did a couple of things here. One, they're sacrificing. They can't get along without it. Everybody's doing it. So we're going to put limits on it. We're going to give it to them. We're going to put limits on it. We're going to refine it. And here are the limits. One, we're going to take Abraham, have a story of him sacrificing Isaac, and then God refusing that sacrifice and making an animal sacrifice in its place. Why? To show you're not supposed to sacrifice people. Sacrifice animals instead, not people. Because human sacrifice was practiced back then. So let's refine it that way. Don't sacrifice people, sacrifice animals. How else are we going to refine it? We're going to give strict laws on how to slaughter. Why? So the animal doesn't experience any more pain than it has to. Because you have to eat, you don't have to cause undue suffering to the animal. So you keep a really sharp blade, single draw across the neck, sever its jugular vein, down the animal goes. You don't abuse it beforehand. You don't abuse it during the sacrifice. You provide meat with a minimum of suffering. And along those lines, if you're close enough to the temple to where you can, then you take your animal to the temple and let the priest slaughter the animal. Why? Because the priest does this time after time after time. He's skilled at slaughtering animals. He's skilled in making sure the animal suffers the least. He's went through the preparation. He knows what he's doing. So the system of sacrifice was still allowed, but it was refined. Now, am I just making all of this up? Or can we find in the Torah that you didn't need sacrifice? Leviticus chapter 7, starting with verse 21. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices, and eat the meat. For when I freed your fathers from the land of Egypt, I did not speak with them or command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifice. But this is why I commanded them. Do my bidding, that I may be your God, and you may be my people. Walk only in the way that I enjoin upon you, that it may go well with you. The system of sacrifices was added later when they couldn't let go of it. Yet let the people eat their meat, but let's refine it so the least amount of suffering is caused. Oh, but to have forgiveness of sins, you have to have the shedding of blood. No, no. You could bring a grain offering. If you couldn't afford the animal, you could bring grain. There's no blood in grain. Not only that, Psalms 46, sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire. Mine eyes hast thou opened. Burnt offering and sin offering hast thou not required. 1 Samuel 15:22. And Samuel said, hath the Lord delight in burnt offering and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey better than sacrifice, to hearken better than the fat of rams. Hosea 14:2. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have fallen because of your sin. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, forgive all guilt and accept what is good. Instead of bulls, we will pay the offering of our lips. Now, of course, when the temple was being completed, Solomon said, if your people can't make it to the temple, let them turn towards you and come with repentance and hear their prayers. And that brings to another quote in the Talmud. And the priest shall burn it on the altar, his food to God. Do you think he needs to eat? Does not the verse Psalms 50 12 to 13 proclaim, should I hunger, I would not tell you, for the world and all it contains is mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? But it is not for my desire that you are offering, says God, but for your own. As is written in Leviticus 19:5, for your own desire you should offer it. So the system of sacrifice was, one, because the people wanted to eat meat. They needed the nutrients. But number two, that's one thing that they couldn't get out of their heads in the idea of worship, is that to worship God, you had to sacrifice. To honor God, you had to sacrifice. So what does God do? He tells us to refine our animal natures. He gives us reminders. Refine your animal nature. That part of you that is an animal, lift it up towards God. Make it something holy. Shalom.